Hey everybody, welcome to Bible class today. We have been talking about Abraham, and one of the things with Abraham that we've got to look at is something called a covenant. So today we're going to find out what is a covenant, and then I also have a little bit of a science experiment for us. So let's go ahead and get to it.
Boom, ba boom, ba boom, ba boom, ba boom, boom, ba boom, boom, ba 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 boom.
So recently, in one of our Bible classes, we were looking at maps and we were following the journey of Abraham. But one of the things that I always forget is where exactly are all these things happening in the world that we live in now. So this is actually a satellite image from Google Maps. And as I look at it, it's going to show us where Ur of the Chaldeans is in the area that we would call Mesopotamia in modern day times. And I'm trying to zoom in, and this is based on some research that I tried to figure out where was this city. And I think that I got it right, but we'll try to zoom in on it and you can see this is where modern day Ur of the Chaldeans would be. And give you an idea of in our world. So whenever we see the zoomed out picture, over on the left side you'll see the Mediterranean Sea. That coastline is where Israel is. So that gives you a good reference of where are we talking about with reference to Israel, where God's people are. Anyway, so that's where he lived, where he started out, and when God called him up from Ur of the Chaldeans and he made him a promise. Now we know that he moved up to Haran, and this I think is where this promise actually happens. But what is a covenant? Do you know? Do you know of any examples of covenants that we make today? A covenant, the way that I think of it, a covenant is a special promise or a special agreement to do something. A good example of a covenant today, I have a wedding ring. This is a symbol of a covenant that I made with Miss Megan. Whenever we got married, we made a covenant with each other, a special promise or a special agreement to stay with each other and to be bound together for life. That's a good example of what a covenant is today. God makes covenants as well, and he makes special promises and agreements with some of his people. And Abram is one of those people that he makes a covenant with. Now, he calls him up from Ur of the Chaldeans, which we were just looking at on the map. And then whenever he calls him, this comes from Genesis chapter 12. We're going to read this together. Why don't we read 1 through 7 together? The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." So Abram went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. Now remember, he started in Ur. He and his father and brothers traveled to Haran, and then this happens. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan. And they arrived there. Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord, who had appeared to him. Now, if you were listening in there were a few promises that God made, if you will, the beginnings of some covenants. Do you remember what some of those promises were? I was trying to hold up my fingers whenever he was making those promises. Can you remember? One of them, verse 2. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. Do you remember whenever the people were building the Tower of Babel, one of the things that they said, we are going to make a name for ourselves. And now God is saying to Abram, I'm going to make your name great. It's kind of interesting to see the contrast. The people tried to make their names great. It didn't work out, but God said, I'm going to make your name great, and it happened. What's another promise that he made to Abram? That wasn't the only one, was it? There's several times that he says this here. I will bless you, and you will be a blessing. Right in the end of verse 2, I'll make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. Whoever curses you, I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So he's going to make Abraham a blessing. And he's going to bless Abraham. And then all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. That's a lot. Whenever you think about it, there's another promise hidden in that. And it's a promise to us. It's a covenant. All the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. I think this is a long time delayed kind of promise as we consider time. But through Jesus, because Abraham's lineage leads all the way down to Jesus. And that is where the blessing of all peoples on earth really comes true. Because Jesus comes through Abraham. And then he promised in verse 7, to your offspring I will give this land. He didn't say to Abraham, he said to his offspring. And whenever we read the account of the people that are descended from Abraham, that's where they ended up living, what we call the promised land. Whenever you look at Moses and the Exodus and you follow them and you see Joshua going into the Canaan land, the promised land, they finally get that land and it comes true. And I think it's interesting that he would eventually, in chapter 15, point to the stars. Let's look at that real quick. Genesis chapter 15. The word of the Lord came to Abram. This man, Eliezer of Damascus, he will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. Verse 5, he took him outside and said, look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said, so shall your offspring be. But he said, look up at the stars, if you will. The stars might be a sign for his descendants. Apparently, the religious people of the place really believed that there were a whole bunch of different gods, and that all those different gods controlled the earth. We've talked about this before, so I won't get into a lot of detail here. But their wise men, their religious leaders that believed in all these different gods would oftentimes look up at the stars, and they believed that they held a message for them. And it's interesting that God says, look up at the stars, if you will. I have a message for you. You can't even count the stars. You won't even be able to count your descendants. There will be so many of them. That's an interesting contrast between the way the of Chaldeans, those people, looked at the stars, and how God used the stars as an example. He was making Abraham such a promise. And what's fascinating, you and I can be descendants of Abraham if indeed we follow in the footsteps of faith of Abraham. But today, one of the things that I think would be difficult, if God just spoke to you, I wonder if you might go, am I hearing things? Am I a little crazy? How do I know that God is real? How do I know that he's really speaking to me? That's one of the things about Abram that I think is important. He had faith. If you remember our memory verse, Hebrews 11 verse 1. Faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. He couldn't see God. How did he know he was real? So I want to do a little bit of a science experiment here. And we're going to go over to the kitchen table for this. So I'm going to show you a demonstration that I think will help us grab the abstract concept of how God is real, even if we can't see him. So let's go do that. So if somebody asked you to explain to them how God is real, what would you do? Well, if it was me, I would point to the world outside and say, look at the creation. Look at the complexity of life that exists just outside of my window. Sometimes we see squirrels. Sometimes we see birds. I've seen possums. I know in our general neighborhood, we go walking. Sometimes we see bobcats. We've seen coyotes. I've seen snakes and lizards and bugs and spiders, all these things, including ourselves. Where do they come from? I believe God created them. It's so complex. But all of these things are made of invisible things that we call atoms and molecules. You can't see them. How do we know those are real? So I wanted to do something really quick. So I have cold water in this glass, and I'm going to put a couple of drops of food coloring in it. And I just want you to watch what happens. And then I have hot water on this side, and I'm going to put a couple of drops of food coloring in it. We'll watch them change.
Interesting to see. I don't know if you can see it very well over there. I might zoom in.
You should be able to tell that the red food coloring, it has spread throughout the glass more than the blue food coloring. I didn't stir it. I didn't try to shake it around or anything of that sort. It has just spread throughout. And as I look at the red, it really seems like it's spread evenly, and I can still see a lot of streaks in the blue, like it's not really spreading around that much. But what causes those things to spread out? That is our question. So you can really tell that the red has spread more thoroughly than the blue. And the reason that happens is because of the molecules. These little tiny molecules and atoms and things, they are moving around. Even inside of a clear liquid like water, obviously it's not so clear now because there's color in it, but even inside of those clear things like that, these molecules are moving all the time. Why did the blue not spread as fast as the red? Is it because it's blue and red? Or do you remember that this was cold water and this was hot water? What does that have to do with it? Well, whenever things are cold, they don't move as much. But when things are hot, they move a whole lot more. So the natural movement of the molecules caused the red to spread more thoroughly without me having to stir it. Whereas with the blue, they're just barely moving, so it doesn't spread around as much. That's invisible. You can't see it, but you can see the effects of it. I can't see the movement of the molecules, but I can see what the movement of the molecules did. So when I look at the creation, I can't see God, but I can see what God did. And I think that's an important thing to remember. Just like we can't see these things happening, we can see what they do. That, again, Hebrews 11 verse 1, is faith, being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. I can't see it, but I can see what it did. So I hope this has been interesting. On Wednesday, we're going to get into more of a discussion of Abraham's descendants, and we have an activity for you to do with that. I will try to get a supply list for you so you can have the things you need if you want to do that on your own, so that you'll have time to get those ready. Look forward to seeing you again on Wednesday. Hope you have a good week.